The great conclave had watched over the galaxy for 50,000 years. From hidden outposts scattered throughout the stars, they observed younger civilizations without ever making their presence known. This alliance of 237 advanced species followed one unbreakable rule: never interfere with developing worlds until they achieved faster-than-light travel on their own. Senior Observer Tay floated before the massive viewing screen, his slender form barely casting a shadow in the dim light of the observation chamber. The display showed a spreading darkness at the galaxy's edge, a phenomenon the conclave had named the Void Cascade. 3 star systems had already disappeared into its hungry maw, leaving nothing behind. "The projections are complete," said Director Day as she entered the chamber. Her voice was soft but carried easily in the perfect acoustics. "The cascade will reach the core worlds within 3 centuries. Tay turned, his pale eyes reflecting the ominous darkness on the screen. "And our solutions?" "We have none," Day admitted. She gestured, and a series of complex equations appeared in the air between them. "Our scientists have explored 17,000 approaches. All have failed." This was the terrible truth that the High Council had been avoiding for decades. Despite their incredible technology and vast knowledge, the conclave had no answer to the Void Cascade. Their civilization had grown comfortable and cautious over the millennia. Innovation had slowed to a crawl as they focused on observation rather than exploration. "There is one possibility we haven't fully considered," Tay said carefully. He knew his next words might be seen as heresy. "The humans." Director Day's expression showed surprise, then concern. "Earth? They haven't even colonized their own solar system properly. They're centuries from achieving interstellar travel." "Yet they solve problems differently than we do," Tay countered. He waved his hand, and the display changed to show images of Earth. Blue, oceans, green continents, and the lights of cities shining on the night side. They take risks. They try approaches that seem illogical. Sometimes they fail spectacularly, but sometimes they succeed where our careful planning would not," Day finished. She was silent for a long moment. "Contacting them would break our oldest law." "Yes, but extinction would break everything else." The debate raged for 7 days in the High Council chamber. Some members were outraged at the very suggestion of contact. Others saw it as their only hope. Council leader Han, who had observed humans for over a century, spoke last. "I have watched Earth's children stumble and fall and rise again," he said, his ancient voice carrying across the hushed chamber. "They fight among themselves over resources that we could create in abundance. Their technology is primitive by our standards, yet they possess something we have lost: hunger, desperation, the will to survive against all odds." Han moved to the center of the chamber, his robes flowing around him. "I have seen them face disasters that should have destroyed them, only to emerge stronger. Perhaps this is what we need now, not more knowledge, but more courage." The vote was close, but the decision was made. For the first time in its long history, the conclave would deliberately reveal itself to a species that had not yet reached the stars. The mission to establish first contact fell to Tay, who had studied Earth longer than most. A small observation post already existed on Earth's moon, hidden on the far side where human instruments rarely looked. It would serve as their meeting point. As Tay prepared for the journey, Director Day visited his quarters. "Are you certain they'll help us?" she asked. "We've done nothing for them. We've watched their wars and disasters and never intervened." Tay considered this. "I believe they will help because that is their nature. They extend hands to strangers. They dream of meeting others among the stars." He smiled slightly. "And they love impossible problems." The ship departed the next day, traveling through folded space to reach Earth's solar system in moments. As they approached the blue planet, Tay stood at the viewing port and watched it grow larger. Soon he would meet these humans face to face and ask for their help to save a galaxy they didn't even know existed. "Let us hope," he whispered, "that they are as remarkable up close as they appear from afar." Behind him, the display showed the void cascade continuing its slow, hungry advance through the stars. Commander Lee guided her lunar rover across the gray dust of the far side of the moon. The mining operation had been running for 3 years now, extracting rare minerals from the lunar soil. Today, however, she was following strange energy readings that her instruments had picked up near the rim of Daedalus crater. Base, this is Lee. I'm about 500 meters from the source now, she said into her radio. The signal took nearly 2 seconds to reach the lunar base on the near side. Copy that, Commander, came the reply. Any visual confirmation yet? Negative. Wait. Lee stopped the rover and stared through her helmet visor. There's something embedded in the crater wall. It's not natural. The object was perfectly smooth, a dark oval set into the rock face. It reflected no light despite the harsh lunar sun overhead. As Lee watched, the oval began to shimmer, then simply vanished, revealing a passage that should not exist. Base, are you seeing this? Lee's heart pounded as she checked her oxygen levels out of habit. There's an opening in the crater wall. Before Base could respond, a figure emerged from the passage. Tall and slender, it moved with a grace impossible in lunar gravity. Its body seemed to shift between solid and translucent, and it wore no spacesuit despite the vacuum. Commander Sunmi Lee, the figure said, somehow transmitting directly to her helmet comm. I am June of the Galactic Conclave. We have been watching your kind for centuries. Now we need your help. 3 days later, the lunar base conference room held the strangest gathering in human history. Emergency shuttles had brought leaders from Earth's major nations, along with top scientists. They sat across from 3 aliens who called themselves Conclave representatives. You must understand the scale of the threat, June explained, projecting images of the void cascade above the table. This darkness has already consumed 3 star systems. Our calculations show it will eventually reach your world. Why haven't we detected it? Asked Dr. Park, Earth's leading astrophysicist. Your instruments are not sensitive enough yet, replied another alien named Tay. But make no mistake, the danger is real. And you've been watching us all this time? President Kim's voice held an edge of anger. Through wars, disasters, disease, you did nothing? Non-interference is our highest law, June said simply. Until now. Why break that law for this? Asked Lee, who had been invited due to her role. In the first contact, Director Day, the 3rd alien, spoke for the first time. Because despite our advanced technology, we cannot solve this problem. Our civilization has grown cautious, risk-averse. We observe rather than act. And humans? Prompted Dr. Park. You act, said June. You take risks that seem foolish to us yet often succeed. Your species has faced extinction-level threats multiple times and survived through innovation and determination. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. An alien civilization far more advanced than humanity was asking for help. What exactly do you want from us? President Kim finally asked. A partnership, Tay said. We offer our technology and knowledge. You offer your unique perspective and problem-solving abilities. Over the next week, agreements were drafted. The Conclave would share certain technologies with Earth, while human scientists would join a special research team focused on the Void Cascade. Commander Lee was appointed as humanity's first representative to the Conclave. On her last night on Earth before departing for the Conclave's main research station, Lee stood on her apartment balcony looking at the stars. Her sister Jin joined her, bringing 2 cups of tea. Are you afraid? Jin asked. Lee considered the question. Yes, but also excited. We're not alone, Jin. All those years looking at the stars, wondering, and they were watching us the whole time. Do you trust them, these aliens? I think so, Lee said slowly. They could have conquered us easily if they wanted to. Instead, they're asking for our help. That means something. Jin sipped her tea. What if you can't solve this void thing? Lee smiled. Then we'll die trying. That's what humans do. The next morning, Lee boarded a Conclave transport ship alongside 30 other humans. scientists, engineers, and diplomats chosen to represent Earth. As the ship rose above the atmosphere, June approached her. "Your people took this news better than we expected," he said. "Many species would respond with fear or aggression when learning they are not alone." Lee watched her blue home planet growing smaller below. "We've been hoping to meet someone like you for generations. Maybe not under these circumstances, but still. This is the fulfillment of an old dream. And now we face a nightmare together," June added quietly. "Yes," Lee nodded. "But that's better than facing it alone." The ship accelerated, and Earth vanished as they entered folded space. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger universe, one filled with wonders, dangers, and the looming shadow of the Void Cascade. 5 years had passed since first contact. The orbital research station Unity hung in space like a shining wheel, rotating slowly to create gravity for its inhabitants. Inside, humans worked alongside aliens from 24 different worlds, all united by a single purpose: to stop the Void Cascade. Dr. Yoon stared at the holographic display floating above the round table. The three-dimensional model showed the darkness spreading at the edge of the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. Something about the pattern bothered her. "Play it again," she said to the room's computer. "Slow it down to 1/10 speed." The model reset and began to show the cascade's growth again. Dr. Yoon walked around the table, watching from all angles. Then she saw it. Tiny pulses, almost invisible, that appeared just before each new expansion of the darkness. "There." She pointed. "Do you see that?" Senior scientist Tay moved closer, his tall form bending to examine the area she indicated. "I see nothing unusual." "That's because you're looking for natural patterns," Dr. Yun explained. "But these pulses are too regular. They repeat exactly every 3.7 seconds. She touched the control panel, and the computer highlighted the pulses in red. Now they were impossible to miss. Tiny bursts of energy that preceded each wave of destruction. "This isn't a natural phenomenon," Dr. Yun said quietly. "This is a weapon." The news spread quickly through Unity Station. Most of the Conclave scientists dismissed the theory as impossible. No known civilization had the power to create something like the Void Cascade, and the Conclave had mapped every intelligent species in the galaxy. Admiral Lee, who had once been Commander Lee on the Moon, listened to both sides of the argument in a crowded meeting room. "Even if Dr. Yun is right," said Director Day, "what difference does it make? Natural or artificial, we still don't know how to stop it." "It makes all the difference," Admiral Lee replied. "If someone made this weapon, then it can be unmade. But we need more data." She looked around the room at the mixed group of humans and aliens. "I propose an expedition to the edge of the cascade." The journey took 3 weeks in the research vessel Horizon. As they approached the darkness, even the bravest crew members felt fear. They were facing something that had destroyed entire star systems. "Hold position here," Admiral Lee ordered when they were close enough to see the cascade, with the naked eye. It looked like a wall of absolute blackness against the stars. "Deploy the sensors." Dr. Yoon had designed special instruments for this mission. They floated away from the ship, moving closer to the darkness than any probe had gone before. For 3 days, they collected data and sent it back to the Horizon. On the 4th day, Dr. Yoon called Admiral Lee to the lab section of the ship. Her face showed both excitement and worry. "I was right," she said without greeting. "Look at these readings. These quantum signatures can only be created artificially. Someone is causing this destruction on purpose." Admiral Lee studied the data. She wasn't a scientist, but she had learned much in 5 years. "Can we stop it?" Dr. Yoon pointed to another set of readings. "I think so. These energy pulses have a specific pattern. If we could create an opposite pattern, a counterpulse, we might disrupt the cascade." "Like noise-canceling headphones," said Admiral Lee, remembering an old Earth technology. "Exactly," Dr. Yun nodded. "But on a quantum scale, we would need to build devices I'm calling cascade disruptors and position them at precise points along the edge of the darkness." "How do we test this theory?" Dr. Yoon took a deep breath. That's the hard part. We need to create a miniature version of the disruptor and test it right here, close to the cascade. But it involves bending some fundamental laws of physics as the Conclave understands them. The ship's Conclave scientists were horrified when they heard the plan. What, Dr. Yun proposed violated principles they considered sacred. It was like suggesting they set fire to water or make gravity push instead of pull. This cannot work, insisted senior scientist Tay. And if it does work, it could accelerate the cascade instead of stopping it. We don't have the luxury of perfect certainty, Admiral Lee told him. On Earth we have a saying, sometimes you have to leap before you look. Tay's expression showed he found this philosophy disturbing, but he stepped aside. The test was prepared. A small device, not much bigger than Admiral Lee's hand, was launched toward the edge of the darkness. When it reached position, Dr. Yun activated it remotely. For a moment nothing happened. Then a tiny spot of light appeared in the wall of darkness, a hole where stars could be seen again. It worked, whispered Dr. Yun, her voice filled with wonder. We pushed it back. The hole lasted only 30 seconds before closing, but it was enough. They had proof that the void cascade could be fought. As the horizon turned to bring this news back to Unity Station, Admiral Lee knew that the real battle was just beginning. The grand chamber of the Conclave High Council fell silent as Admiral Lee finished presenting the horizon's findings. Video from the expedition showed the small but clear victory against the void cascade, a temporary hole in the darkness where stars shone through once more. This evidence confirms Dr. Yun's theory, Admiral Lee said, standing tall before the circular table where 12 ancient aliens sat in judgment. The cascade is artificial, and it can be disrupted. Counselor Han, the oldest member, leaned forward. His skin had the pale blue tint that came with extreme age among his kind. Even if we accept your findings, Admiral, your proposed solution is too dangerous. More dangerous than doing nothing? Dr. Yun asked from her position beside Lee. The young scientist had lost weight during their journey, but her eyes burned with determination. We need more study, said another counselor. More tests. Perhaps in a decade. We don't have a decade, interrupted Admiral Lee. Every day the cascade grows. 3 more star systems have been lost since we began this project. Director Day, who had supported the humans from the beginning, spoke softly. What exactly are you proposing, Admiral? Lee gestured, and a hologram appeared above the table. A fleet of ships, each carrying multiple versions of the disruption device they had tested. 12 vessels positioned at key points along the cascade's edge. Together, they can create a counterwave large enough to push back the darkness and reveal what lies behind it. And if something hostile waits there, asked Counselor Han, you could be opening a door to something worse. Then we'll face it together, Lee replied. But doing nothing guarantees our eventual destruction. The debate lasted for days. In the Pound, and the Council voted 7-5 against the mission. The risk was deemed too great, the evidence too uncertain. They would continue research but take no direct action. Admiral Lee stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, watching Earth rotate below. She had returned to report the Council's decision to her own people. Now she faced an impossible choice. They're afraid, said a voice behind her. Lee turned to see Tay, the Conclave scientist who had once opposed her. Now his expression was troubled. They have been observers for so long. They have forgotten how to act. Fear, I understand, Lee said, but this is suicide. Many younger species in the Conclave agree with you. Tay moved to stand beside her at the window. Not all of us wish to accept extinction quietly. Lee looked at him sharply. What are you saying? I am saying that resources might become available. Ships, technology. If humans were to take action on their own. Hope flickered in Lee's chest. That would violate the Council's direct order. Yes, Tay admitted. After 50,000 years, we are finally learning the value of disobedience. 3 months later, Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of the Earthship Defiance. Around her, 11 other vessels moved into formation, a mix of human ships and vessels, provided secretly by Conclave allies. Each carried multiple cascade disruptors built according to Dr. Yun's designs. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Captain Min, her second in command. Lee nodded. "Send the signal, Formation Omega. Take us to the coordinates." The small fleet traveled to the edge of the void cascade, to the same spot where the Horizon had conducted its test. This time they would attempt something much larger, a coordinated disruption that would tear a hole in the darkness big enough to send ships through. "All disruptors online," reported Dr. Yun from her station. "Energy signatures stable." "Begin the sequence," ordered Lee. The 12 ships moved into precise positions, forming a curved line along the edge of the blackness. At Lee's command, they activated their disruptors simultaneously. Energy beams of blinding white light shot from each vessel, converging on a single point in the darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the blackness began to ripple, like fabric in a strong wind. A small hole appeared, grew larger, then stabilized into a passage large enough for a ship to enter. "Hold the aperture," Lee commanded. "Defiance will investigate." Despite protests from her crew, Lee insisted on leading the scouting mission. The Defiance moved slowly toward the opening, then through it. On the other side, they found not empty space but a vast structure, a web of dark energy surrounding what looked like enormous crystalline ships. Before they could retreat, a presence filled the bridge. Not a physical being, but a consciousness that somehow pressed against their minds. You were not meant to resist. It communicated directly into their thoughts. You were meant to be harvested, like all the others before you. Images flooded their minds, countless galaxies seeded with life, allowed to develop, then consumed for energy when they reached their peak. The beings called themselves harvesters, and they had been repeating this cycle for billions of years. "We observed your kind through the conclave," the voice continued. "They have always accepted their end peacefully. Why do you fight what cannot be changed?" Admiral Lee stood from her command chair, facing the invisible presence. "Because that's what humans do. And now we've taught others to do the same." Behind the Defiance, the rest of the fleet moved through the opening, weapons ready. The battle for the galaxy's survival had begun. The Harvester's massive structures loomed before the human fleet, dark, crystalline shapes that seemed to both exist and not exist at the same time. Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of the Defiance, feeling the alien consciousness pressing against her mind. "Your resistance is unexpected," the Harvester communicated. "In 10 billion years, no species has fought back at this stage." "Then you've never met humans before," Lee replied, her voice steady despite her fear. She turned to Dr. Yun at the science station. "Is the modified disruptor ready?" Dr. Yun nodded, her fingers flying over the control panel. "Ready, Admiral. But this is completely untested. We don't know what will happen." "We know what will happen if we do nothing," Lee said. She opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships move to attack positions. Prepare to activate disruptors on my mark." The plan was desperate, born from Dr. Yun's insight during their journey. If the disruptors could create holes in the void cascade, perhaps they could be adjusted to reflect the energy back to its source, like a mirror turning light back upon itself. The 12 ships spread out, facing the massive Harvester structures. As they moved into position, dark energy beams shot out from the crystal ships, slicing through space toward the human fleet. "Evasive maneuvers," Lee ordered. The Defiance rolled hard to starboard, barely avoiding the deadly beam. 2 other ships were not so lucky. The beam cut through their hulls, leaving them drifting in dark. "We need more time," Dr. Yun said urgently. "The disruptors aren't fully aligned yet." Captain Min's voice came over the comm. "My ship can buy you that time." Before Lee could protest, Min's vessel, the Courage, accelerated directly toward the largest Harvester structure, firing all weapons. "Min, no!" Lee shouted, but it was too late. The Courage disappeared in a blinding flash as it collided with the crystal structure. When the light faded, a crack had appeared in the massive ship. "His sacrifice worked," Dr. Yun reported, her voice thick with emotion. "The Harvester's energy field is destabilized. Disruptors can be aligned in 30 seconds. More dark energy. Beams lanced out, destroying another human vessel. The remaining ships continued their desperate dance, avoiding destruction while moving into final position. Disruptors aligned, Dr. Yun finally announced. Ready on your command. Lee took a deep breath. All ships activate disruptors now. 9 beams of brilliant white energy shot toward the harvester structures. This time, instead of creating holes in the darkness, the modified disruptors caught the dark energy and bent it back upon itself. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The crystal ships began to crack and shatter as their own power turned against them. It's working, someone shouted on the bridge, but the victory came at a terrible cost. 3 more human ships exploded as they held position, their crews sacrificing themselves to keep the disruptor beams steady. The harvester consciousness screamed in their minds, a sound of confusion as much as pain. This cannot be. You are prey, not predators. We are human, Lee answered simply, and we choose our own fate. With a final surge of power, the remaining ships pushed their disruptors beyond safe limits. The feedback loop grew stronger, tearing the harvester structures apart from within. The void began to collapse in on itself, sucking the crystal ships into a singularity of their own making. All ships retreat, Lee ordered. The surviving vessels turned and raced for the opening they had created, which was already beginning to close. One by one, they slipped through, the Defiance last of all. As they emerged back into normal space, the hole sealed behind them with a flash that temporarily blinded their sensors. When the screens cleared, the void cascade was gone. In its place were normal stars, shining as they had for billions of years. Of the 12 ships that had set out on the mission, only 5 returned. They limped back to Unity Station bearing news of both tragedy and triumph. The Conclave High Council received them in shocked silence. Admiral Lee, her uniform still stained with blood from a wound received during the battle, stood before them without apology. The threat is ended, she said simply. The harvesters are destroyed, and the void cascade is no more. Counselor Han, who had opposed the mission, rose slowly from his seat. For a long moment he simply looked at Lee. Then, to everyone's surprise, he bowed deeply to her. We observed for 50,000 years, he said, his ancient voice filled with something like shame, while you acted in 5. In the days that followed, a new alliance formed. The Conclave's rigid hierarchy gave way to a more open structure, with humans and other younger species given equal voice. The doctrine of non-interference was abandoned, replaced by a commitment to protect all life in the galaxy. 10 years later, the intergalactic vessel Pioneer prepared for its maiden voyage. On its observation deck stood Admiral Lee, now with gray in her hair beside her old friend Tay. Do you think we're ready for what's out there? Tay asked, looking toward the distant lights of Andromeda Galaxy. Lee smiled. No one's ever ready to change everything. That's why we have to try. As the massive engines engaged, humanity and its allies ventured forth not as passive observers of the cosmos, but as its active protectors. Retry, Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.